This is Dylan from the Starknet Foundation. It's great to be here with session two of Terraforming Web3. This session is all about building Web3 gaming ecosystems. And I'm very excited to dive into this conversation with Secretive, and I'll let him introduce himself shortly. But I'm very excited to dive into this about what makes Web3 gaming ecosystems evolve, how they differ from traditional gaming models, and the practical strategies developers can use to succeed. We'll cover community building, market strategy, user-generated content, launch preparation, which I know Secretive has been deeply involved in recently, and advice for teams that are building today. So before we jump in, Secretive, would you mind briefly introducing yourself and what you do in the Web3 gaming sphere?
Sure. Yeah. Hello, everybody. I am an anonymous bear today, in keeping with my pseudonymous character inside of the Realms ecosystem. So yeah, my name is Secretive, and I have been in the crypto space for a long time. I realized that nearly 10 years, basically 10 years. Um, and the last, I'd think 4 or 5 of those, sort of professionally. Um, so I've transferred my background in advertising communications into full-time crypto, and it happened pretty organically, with my passion point for blockchain, sort of starting to throw up opportunities for me to sort of do consultant work and then creative work, and then during an earlier, I think the 20 around 2020 time, sort of started to move into the space, and during the sort of the NFT era, there was a project that really stood out for me, which was the Loop project, which is like an open source initiative to allow a community to build, a worlds together, to build worlds permissionlessly. And so a sort of side project that was spawned from Loot was Realms, and it's a community that sort of set its sights on building a open source civilization building game that was running, fully on chain. And that idea just really got to me. I was like, wow, like how cool, to be able to build a game as part of a community. And the on-chainy part actually became more and more important to me over time. But at the beginning, it was actually more about the excitement of going on this like quest where all the people in the community would use their different skill sets to contribute to the production of this game. Um, and so, yeah, I have been, contributing to that community, from a sort of creative and a communication perspective, um, for, I don't know, 3 years now, as a contributor to the DAO. And so that's do some other bits and pieces now. Work across some other projects too, specifically Daydreams, which is a AI agent framework, which is a kind of omni-chain project. So those are the two things I'm working on currently, and I do those things because I'm just super passionate, really, about those topics. And that's, I think, that's something I'll talk about, I think, like over the course of this conversation, is the importance of passion from a personal perspective. Being motivated to turn up every day, regardless of what the market's doing. And also, I think it's really important for like a community to gather around like a passion point. I think that it's nicer to gather around a passion than it is a speculative financial opportunity. Maybe think to me both, but a passion at core is really important.
Agreed. Well, Secretive, thank you so much for joining. And for those who are joining us outside of the Starknet ecosystem, Secretive is an absolute legend. Highly recommend following everything that he is doing with the Realms community and the Daydreams community as well. So thank you so much for joining Bear Mask, Capybara Mask. all involved. And Sebastian, it's also great to have you here. Would you mind just briefly introducing yourself and what the Sandbox is and what you are doing?
Hi there, everyone. Hello. I'm the co-founder and COO at the Sandbox. The Sandbox is a decentralized virtual world where essentially anyone can become a creator, making 3D content, assets, or full games and experiences without any single line of code. It's all a no-code tool, and they can truly own those creations with the use of blockchain and NFTs. And then they can publish those creations on a virtual land, a piece of digital real estate where like other users can access with their avatar. We've grown as one of the largest open metaverse platform with close to 6.3 million users and partnered with over 400 major brands globally, including Snoop Dogg, Warner Music, Attack on Titan, and many, many others. I'm also the president of the Blockchain Game Alliance. It's an association that now counts over 600 members and promote and educate about the use of blockchain technology within the gaming industry. And I'm also the co-founder of a digital art gallery located in Paris called Artverse, which is also like a cultural hub that brings many different communities together to exchange and discover digital art.
Awesome. Well, it's awesome. It's great to have you. Just as an FYI, huge fan of the Sandbox. It was actually the first metaverse and gaming project that actually introduced me into the Web3 gaming world and what we can
Yeah.
actually do differently than the Web2 space. So I'm super excited to be chatting with both of you about building Web3 gaming ecosystems. And you two are basically the two best people we could think of to speak about that. So let's kick it off with some questions. Sebastian, maybe we kick it off with you. What are some great examples? You can talk about the sandbox. You can also chat about anything of thriving Web3 gaming ecosystems today. What exactly sets these ecosystems apart from traditional gaming ecosystems?
Well, I think like to answer that question, like we should look at what's definitely an ecosystem. Like an ecosystem means like there is not just a single game, but there is actually like a platform that can people can build upon. And there's not just one company, but there's like multiple company, individuals, and like teams that develop like on top of it various product, project, services, games, and so on. And that can be with the use of blockchain and decentralization that can be composable in ways like you don't need to ask permission for having one company to give you an API so you can access their information and build upon and so on. So for me, like the primary ecosystem that successful ecosystem we're seeing in gaming is the actual blockchain itself, like bring like developer application. So great example over time have been the Ethereum blockchain and moved like the Polygon ecosystem that pushed and drive like a large adoption from gaming. And then more recently, there is a greater choice of ecosystem that are available for developers to pick from and players to enter. Immutable running ecosystem that's built on the success of Axie Infinity game and bring their user on. Avalanche as an ecosystem that provide as well great access to wildlife gaming. And I think if you look at the spectrum of every blockchain, they are at the core strong ecosystem. Then at a little higher level upon, I think in more gaming, more specifically, um, I believe Axie Infinity, the Sandbox, and even before CryptoKitties, have built and Telegram open network have built great ecosystem that didn't just count as like this is a single game, but that give birth to many jobs, many roles, and larger community involvement at different parts of the gameplay or the NFT they provide. For example, in Sandbox, we are user-generated content platform, and we have hundreds of creator studios that are developing experiences and providing services for brands and third party to enter the metaverse. For example, with Axie Infinity, you've seen in 2021-22 with the rise of the play to earn business model, we've seen guilds appear and YGG and many other guilds that onboarded players, educated them, give them access by renting certain NFT that they needed to enter and play the gameplay, and offer them like financial incentive in exchange of their participation, splitting a revenue among the guild members and the owner of those NFT. So these are great examples of ecosystem where like a single game of product has enabled like the creation of like a thriving environment where multiple parts can contribute to build, to participate into the value creation that like ownership of digital assets has enabled typically.
Awesome. And I kind of want to touch on the beginning and end of your answer. Just as a gaming ecosystem, it's multiple companies, permissionless, and mostly all participating in this thriving environment um, for value creation. I think that kind of fits exactly into what Realms is trying to do with their set of games. So, Secretive, maybe you can talk a little bit about the concept of Realms, some of the games that are building on it associated with Lords, and then we can dive into critical elements as you're building out this ecosystem related to tokenomics, governance model, open IP. We can community incentives, interoperability. But want to hear like your responses to that as it relates to Realms ecosystem.
Sure. So the Realms ecosystem. So I think that we've been on a journey. So the project is now officially, survivor status, been through um, one at least one full bear market, and now whatever we have right now. So the it's kind of emergent in the sense that the community gathered around an idea originally, the idea of building a sort of civilization building MMO that operated on chain, which meant that it could be a real world that that no individual could be a gatekeeper to, and that was the kind of the original idea. And then over time, this idea of what I think people now call like a deconstructed MMO, where you have different elements of the same game world in different games. So like the idea of what we were building evolved from, okay, let's just create this sort of civilization building game to well, we've got this world, like what else can be in this world? I had this concept of the adventurer, which is like a kind of a character or like an avatar in the world that can go between games. And you're introducing the idea of composability between games and shared assets between worlds, and like a shared currency that sits across all of the different games in the world. And that path, well, it's like, okay, so that's the sort of new vision. Then how do we organize to make that happen? And it's a DAO, and people voted upon proposal after proposal and shaped it into an ecosystem where the DAO uses its treasury to fund teams to explore the creation of new games and new projects which expand out that world. And as a sort of consequence of that, over time, the DAO become a slightly more sophisticated funding mechanism, and has distributed quite a lot of the native currency to other decentralized, or sorry, other Web3 gaming studios that have decided to build inside of the realms for a period of years. And so what we have now, the DAO operating as like the governance and the funding, and then we have, I think, 5 aligned studios building out sort of complex web, on-chain gaming apps. And so there's a couple of examples here. So you have Underwear building out a game called Pistols at 10 Blocks, which is a dueling game which allows people to settle beef in a shootout. And that Underwear are also building out and that's like that's all taking place like behind a saloon inside of the world. So thematically, where these duels are happening is taking place inside the same world. And that same studio, Underwear, is also has an intention to build a land underneath the main Realms world. The main Realms world is called Eternum, which is the civilization building kind of game where you come along and build an empire and seek to dominate, and either by yourself or as part of a tribe. So like they're building out also like a kind of game which is a generative dungeon that goes on forever underneath the realms, underneath the Eternum. So that's like one example of a studio that's sort of formed inside of the community and been funded by the DAO, and is now pursuing its own roadmap. And there's multiple other studios that are operating inside of the ecosystem. So you have Z Corp, who are building like more casual games and who are really leaning hard into the AI agent space and agentic gameplay. You have Grog's Lair, who are off pursuing a partnership with or activating a partnership with the Armored MMA, which is a medieval combat inside an octagon. So that's a sort of really fun, completely outside of the ecosystem. They're outside of not outside of not outside of fully on-chain gaming. They're not just outside of Starknet. They're like fully outside of crypto. They're out there speaking to people who dress up in armor and fight in the ring. So they're looking to acquire new customers in a really sort of fun way. And yeah, there's other studios also building inside of the space, and then the main game, or rather the sort of flagship product, the sort of central game upon which like the project sort of started, is called Eternum. And Eternum is a seasonal world that pops up and lives on chain, and couldn't run anywhere else but on Starknet, because it's building out a a complex world, with an open economy, and with it baked in immutable physics, and all the things that simulate almost like a reality are all taking place on chain via Starknet. And that world spins up for a season. The players come along and they play in the way they want to play, and they seek to dominate that world. And once somebody has effectively conquered Eternum, the world closes down until the next season starts.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
that's the kind of the gist.
No, I'm excited for Eternum season 1, going to come up at the end of March, hopefully. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. Sebastian, would definitely love your take too. Sandbox has, for lack of a better term, sand, and not here to talk about the token itself, but I'm curious about how critical it is to take elements like tokenomics, governance models, and manage open IP, especially in metaverse like the sandbox. How do you approach this, and how should others approach it as well if they're building their own Web3 gaming ecosystem?
I do think like the sand token itself has played a very important role within like attracting the creators, rewarding the creators, and building a bigger community around Sandbox, so developing a bigger ecosystem. Definitely financial incentive, like without even talking about like speculation, but just like the ability to either earn back a portion of revenue when you sell a digital asset that you own as an NFT, or earning more revenue as a creator than on other more centralized platform, is a very attractive feature. And for Sandbox, what we realize is we have like 3 main categories of users. We have like creators, people who own the land or use the game maker on very regular basis and publish an experience on it. We do have players who engage with their avatar to explore all the different experiences available on the map, complete quests, and earn rewards in sand and in form of NFTs, and eventually spend it as well, to like earn more, collect, etc. And then we have people who are familiar with Sandbox, who own Sand but are neither players or creator, and these are actually probably the largest part of people. So when I travel around the world to explain and share the vision or update, I do meet a lot of people who bought a land a few years back or who bought Sand in the few months or few years back. They tell me like they love the vision without being actual user. As you can see, it's an important element that help to contribute building our ecosystem about like awareness, about education, about like driving interest into like the metaverse and to Web3 gaming, having being associated with a portion of the success it could have, not on the short run, but over the long term, maybe over 5, 10 years as we keep progressing and building and delivering around it. And also rewarding people who participate in different form in creating value for us, so creating content, but also creating content in the game itself, but creating content outside, like all the social media content, the live streamers, the post and tutorial we can find from certain creators online, and so on. That is also very valuable for games and help onboard users. So I
Nice.
do believe that the token and the token incentive are essential. We've seen the effect of what I call like network effects in Web3. Specifically, one example that comes to mind is the Telegram Open Network. Like with airdrop, like some games have been able to grow and attract over 10 million users within a matter of days, rewarding and then incentivizing users for participation. We all know that token can be a great way for user acquisition, but we all look for more. We look like how do we create sustainability and retention typically for those users who first came attracted, and that only can come if you do have like great quality product underneath that you deliver toward those users. And that only can come if you also have like put in place the different tools and services that allows to also prevent around like boards, farming, and everything that comes around as well, like free tokens, which is in part solved with blockchain and digital identity and things like ZK rollup solution typically. So I do believe like Sand has allowed Sandbox to become more than a virtual world. Actually, people see ourselves as a gaming ecosystem. They even, and that has led us to like develop and expand the vision we have for Sandbox. We'll announce a few more things later this year into like how Sand can be the token that powers not only our virtual world and its creator community, but also a broader ecosystem of application creators and developers that will have more freedom to develop on what's coming to be announced at Sandbox.
Nice. So you have basically three types of stakeholders: the creators, the players, and people who are familiar and own Sand, aka are those investors. But what I'm kind of really interested in, it seems like you're kind of targeting the fact that, the gameplay quality is just as important as, these token incentives when it comes to retaining players, or all these types of stakeholders, and then managing between those two elements and getting the right mixture of, game economy or token incentives while having a fun game is the right way to align, all these different types of stakeholders. That's hard. I feel like that's where a lot of the ecosystems in the games fail. They over-index into one of them, and then they become a circular error game. But yeah.
Absolutely. The way I see it, it's very simple. Like in the gaming industry before, like developers were like actually putting advertisement in their game in order to monetize. That's a free-to-play model. And people were like, and they were earning more revenue when a portion of their users were clicking on their ads, attracted by a game demo, or like a visual, a trailer about it, and installing the application. That's an example. In more traditional, think of like if you're operating like a coffee shop or like a restaurant and you give free food, free coffee for people to taste. If it tastes bad, like you will not even convert them into a customer. Like they will not be entitled to enter your shop, your restaurant, your coffee or your restaurant to maybe order a full meal and so on. So it's quite natural, and this is something we found into Web3. Like giving the if people are if you have no game, if you have no restaurant, if you have nothing more to give other than a token, like of course you will not retain those users, and they will be like have this butterfly effect where like they move the butterfly customer is like moving around to every sometimes we call it like the swarms of crickets like that come, they get any token they can and they leave. But if you have good product, a portion of them will stay and will even spend back into the economy. We've seen game like Pixels as an example. Luca, CEO, has been posting a lot around like how he's now focusing on converting even more those cohort of users who became more sticky after like they entered and discovered first thanks to the token about his game.
Nice. Perfect. Let's say on that line of thought, retention and stickiness. And I think it comes down to community. So, Secretive, I would love to just understand, what strategies you have used within the Realms community to build what is, one of the strongest and most engaged communities on Starknet right now. What kind of tips can you give? What kind of strategies can you give that you find successful? Maybe some things that you didn't find successful and pivoted away from that for anyone that is looking to
Sure.
build a new Web3 game or ecosystem?
Sure. Yeah, so I think that community, it's hard to build a genuine community, and it's definitely hard to build a community based around, purely around a token, as Sebastian was saying. A token, it can be a wonderful thing. It can provide, incentives for people to turn up and people to take the time to explain a project to a friend because potentially it's like a speculative opportunity, but it's that isn't really how people become interested in passions. Passions are things that people will talk about regardless of there being any kind of financial opportunity involved. So obviously gaming is a passion point, and it's one that people care very much about. And the idea of building a game together is one that's kind of quite at the time felt sort of super novel, and so people naturally became attached to the idea. And then in parallel, I think that the natural interest of sort of key people inside of the ecosystem in like frontier state of the art technologies. It's another passion point. So people like they love hearing about what is the kind of next, what is the thing that's going to shake up the world. And so I think if you were to plot the journey of the Realms community over time, those sort of two passion points and how they kind of map together. I think that's played a really key part in people finding the community very sticky, and they keep coming back to to learn and to participate in new tech. So some examples. I mean, like the Rails project was an EVM, so like it was based upon Solidity. It was going to be on Arbitrum, or I think initially that's where the very first alpha of the game was built. And the sort of the developers who were like trying to squeeze this incredibly complex game onto a layer two based around the EVM, based around Solidity, realized that there's just simply no way of building a complex app that will ever be affordable or a nice user experience. And so we've migrated towards ZK rollups, and that's how we found our way to Starknet. And I think we all learn as a community, even if you're not a developer, I think we all learn as a community through the sort of weekly calls and the conversations about that tech stack. And so there's been countless other things over the course of the 3 years that have been sort of shared education journeys. So the same with like diffusion models and image generation. That's something that as a community, like when the first like popular Mid-Journey model arrived, I think it was like Mid-Journey 2.5 or 3. We were organizing the community to come along and build out game assets and to be creative and to use the bleeding edge tech that they'd never touched before and hadn't really been introduced to anywhere else. And here they are being asked to create the characters that were going to live inside of the realms, the sort of game world they were building. And I think that, yeah, like it's like value, that people can take, from being part of the community, and that can take all sorts of different forms. There's camaraderie, there's like intelligence and information and knowledge. There's alpha and financial opportunity, and so like there's all kinds of there's like a mix, and there's like a recipe, and the realms recipe I think has been yeah, like building a game together, but also doing it on state of the art technology. And I think that those two things just keep people coming back. And what happens is waves. They get waves of so like when we start to lean into, okay, well, we have a fully on-chain game. Guess what? Fully on-chain games are fantastic for agents because like it's an open data. An agent, it's effectively the blockchain is like an API, and the agent can come along and see the full state of the world, and they can act on chain, and there's no gatekeeping, and so like once we sort of like had got our head around that and started to explore agents in the world, different developers or developers that have been building out something else start to then get their hands on this other new tech, and it kind of creates these waves of interest and reigniting people's passion. So yeah, I'm going to keep on coming back to that idea of like people gather around passion points. And so if you are building out a new community, have a sense of what it is that people in your community are really excited by, and then keep on giving the opportunities to learn and get their hands on with things that they are super inspired by or super into.
Amazing. Sebastian, I'm going to come back to you. I want to focus on the creator aspect because one area that I think is part of the reason why I think fully on-chain games and just Web3 gaming in general that you brought up is extremely valuable is just the concept of trustlessness, permissionless extension. And with that comes user-generated content. You were mentioning creators in one of your earlier answers. So what kind of role does this UGC, do the creators actually have in the sandbox? How does it drive the growth of the sandbox and more generally a Web3 gaming ecosystem? And then let's get back to the point of how do you incentivize your community to actually contribute and expand on the UGC and the creator side?
So the great thing we've done at Sandbox, I believe it's been one of the reasons of our success, is like we're heavily focused, and it's definitely our mission statement to empower anyone to become a creator. So we've been heavily focused on serving creator first. Like meaning like when we launched Sandbox originally around 2018, the first thing we released are not the token, not the NFTs, but the first product was VoxEdit, the 3D editor, allowing people to make those 3D assets that will soon become the NFTs. And then we released a game maker, no code, that onboarded as well users who are passionate about and interested into game making. And from there, we introduced them to like launching the first land sale around December 2019, if I remember correctly. And afterwards, later on, the Sand token around August 2020 as well, if I remember correctly. So you can see we built a large community of users, roughly 1 million users engaged with our creation tools initially, and we made sure they were engaged and using the tool before like we start to introduce them to all the benefit of ownership and earning a revenue and monetization. What I also speak quite often about like where do I see the future of gaming going? And for me, like user-generated content is an essential part of like the future of gaming. Like I don't see any single game where players will not have a sense of like control or customization over like their avatar, the levels, the content, the equipment, the maps, or even modding. We've seen that a way to evolve game from like being single game designed by just one company, one game design, or a team of people within a game studio is actually to enable users to modify as much as they want those games, and that will give them like almost an infinite lifetime with this constant replayability, constant spread of like new novelty and content made by the users themselves that bring back to world like discovering what other users have made. And that's how like games like GTA, The Sims, um, and many other have set the path for themselves to be evergreen content that will exist forever. So very excited indeed to empower users with the use of the technology here, and to show that like the metaverse is something that is not going to be built by a single company vision, but will rely essentially on the user generated content to thrive and expand in very sometimes in many unexpected ways as well. And there was one thing I was thinking about as well, like the decentralization of the content in games essentially shouldn't just come into the decentralization of the economy with the utility token, the decentralization of the ownership of the content, but also in the decentralization of the decision and the governance of that, which is something we introduced a bit later, around 5 years after we started with the launch of the DAO last year, where like landowner and landholder can vote, can submit proposal, discuss them on forum, and vote actively to decide how like various initiative to be supported by the community to grow our ecosystem, to educate more users, to spend and support charities or academies and education program, and even to prioritize certain feature, to develop certain third-party tools, not built by the sandbox team, but by external studio to facilitate the life of creators and so on.
Amazing. I like that you're bringing in the governance side. There's the gameplay, there's the governance side, there's the economic policies associated with managing in-game assets. You have to have guidelines for potentially licensing the ecosystem's IP, especially when you have this kind of concept of how UGC is licensed and protected. It's way more than just building a game in Web3. It's really creating this whole environment and living, breathing ecosystem that changes based on the characteristics of their user base and players and creators. So I'm liking that you're bringing up the governance side. We can chat about this all day. I do have one other question before I open it up to questions from the audience. Would definitely love both of you guys to participate. And, just secretive, maybe you can, for anyone who is building a Web3 gaming ecosystem today, what do
Mm-hmm.
you think is the single most important piece of advice? Then I'll pass it on to Sebastian afterwards.
What is the single most important piece of advice? Well, I think that adaptability and flexibility. Here's an example, and this isn't just about us. This is for every project that's been building over the last couple of years. Is that the technology that we started to build on has evolved, obviously in super positive ways. So with starting off on Starknet, we're starting off on before the chain was in full production, and it broke a lot. The programming language changed. The transactions used to take minutes and cost pounds or pennies, so pounds or dollars. And so, over time that has evolved massively in its sort of positive fashion. But equally in that same period of time, the way that people build games is also like dramatically evolved, and the tools that developers use. And I think that this idea of a community has to really buy into the vision, the mission, the kind of goal, the long-term goal, and is able to sort of go through these sort of like ups and downs in terms of price, in terms of like tech changing and the goalposts moving. And so yeah, have a really strong mission, and one, keep on saying that the thing about passion points, but one that that there's enough in there for the people who are building it and the people who are inside of the community to just keep on being excited about and keep on turning up about and keep finding sort of more and more value from, in the sense, of learning and developing and growing. Because however you envisage your sort of like development going, the world is shifting all the time and it's going to change. So the community really is the okay. Another example, is that I think one of the community members tweeted about this. Like, yeah, so is one of the developers actually building out a Eternum tweeted about this the other day. That in a world where like an app can be created inside of a prompt, one-shotted in a prompt, and people are building games, in out of prompts. What remains, and it's the community, and that's the thing that will have the value over time. So I think it's like, accept that the world is shifting beneath your feet at all times. But if you have a really clear goal that people are excited about, and you have enough going on inside of your project that people are truly passionate about, then you can survive and you can adapt and you can be on the edge of things, and hopefully go on to meet your initial goals.
Awesome. Final word before Q&A to you, Sebastian.
Sorry. So yeah, maybe if you can repeat the question, just so we have context again.
Really just a single most important piece of advice that you've discovered while building out the sandbox that you can give to anyone that's looking to build their Web3 gaming ecosystem too.
All right. One single might be difficult, but let me see. I believe
I need sound bites for Twitter, okay?
Yeah. Okay. Like, don't chase the hype and attention game. Like, if you're just appearing that, hey, I'm building metaverse and now I'm building in AI and then I'm building with meme coin, basically you're putting yourself as like, you're very, I would say, like fluffy into like your roadmap and like what you're actually delivering as a product, and you're just trying to capture attention wherever that attention is at the moment. I know it sounds attractive because there is a lot of like social media noise around certain trends that happen in crypto, but at the end, I do believe that like resiliency and consistency into what you're building will pay off much better, and real quality user will get more sticky and pay attention if they see like your existing tool, your existing game keep improving with regular updates, the user experience keep improving, the content, and you focus on your line, what makes you yourself at the end of the day. So at Sandbox, what makes ourselves is our mission statement: empowering creator, delivering great creation to bringing brands, allowing people to own virtual land next to their celebrity, and playing games and experiences with them as their avatar, or even co-create with them. And I think it's been something that over time made people love Sandbox, love what we do, and like make us feel still always relevant without having to play around like teasing around the next thing or the latest thing that's a little bit more trendy and attention grabbing instead.
Amazing. I think we have a couple questions that we can probably open it up to. Sebastian, you actually did just answer this question in the chat, but I think it's a really, really good question that I would like to potentially expand on it. So Luis writes, wondering your opinion on the transition from play to earn model, which he calls unsuccessful extraction mindset with not sustainable, to a better circular economy And what trends are you seeing to learn and improve from our 2021 situation? How do you make a game development sustainable, and what do you recommend for a new studio?
So, well, for a new studio, you want me to jump in? So, like, what I suggested first, like, to create like a sustainable game economy, you need to have like at some point people who are willing to spend actually for like enter the economy. So yes, again, like you can airdrop. It's a way to do user acquisition, to engage and to reward, but and it's good, like you even give some token for the first time users enter, but at some point you need to deliver interesting content that people are willing to pay for. That's the only way to create a sustainable economy. So whether it's content pack, battle pass, extra characters and customization around like self-expression and identity in gaming, which are like existing proven monetization model. um, I do think like just depleting your token reserve by giving reward constantly will not lead toward that. And so you need to be careful and manage that well because it can work initially, but it cannot be your whole and only strategy.
Amazing. I think it's a really good answer. I think we have a couple more. For secretive, actually, I think something that I'd be really interested in is from your perspective, especially as it relates to Eternum. What
Mhm.
are some of the most important factors that teams should be considering when actually preparing for a game launch, from a marketing side, from the technical side, and from a getting people to play your game and have fun kind of side?
Sure. It's hard. I think it's one of the really I think going back to the start of the journey in 2021, I think we were naive about the scope of the work, and uh, the 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 nature of the project has been R&D. There's been an absolute ton of R&D, so this is how like the dojo on-chain gaming framework came to being. Was like, okay, we've got Realms building out this like complex on-chain game, and Dope Wars building out this complex on-chain game, and if we can make this like an open source framework, we can have multiple people maintaining this, and it will allow us to focus on like the game and the game mechanics as opposed to the engine and maintaining the engine. And I think that complex nature of building out something that's never been built before, building out a game, like an incredibly complex, computationally rich app running on chain, had never been done. And so, do you know what is incredibly difficult? Giving timings. Like, it's the worst thing, because there's all these unknown unknowns because it's simply not been done before. And so that, I think, has been one of the really like most challenging aspects of this, is like when, the question when, like, it comes up all the time. And so the when on like a grand scale, like trying to plot out roadmaps, and then the when on the more like local scale. So Eternum now is we've done a preview season and it went well, but now we're going to go into full production with season one. And so obviously we want to be able to say to people, yeah, bums on seats for this date, it's all going to happen. And we are feature complete in terms of like what we want to go into that season, and we know that it'll evolve between season one and season two, all that stuff. But even we're probably like 3 weeks out. It's still like really hard to be like more than 70% certain that it will ship on a certain date. And so both internally, like work with dev teams about that topic, and then externally working with the community about that, because Eternum is quite a big commitment. This time around in season 1, we're actually putting a lot into the game, which makes it casual. So you can come along and you can no life it like people did in season 0 and play 16 hours a day for 2 weeks, or you can turn up and play for 20 minutes and try and go out there and hunt down an NPC, and the NPC is an AI agent and will have its own wallet, and try and either kill it or bribe it or encourage it to go and do something anarchic. So um, that's one of the more challenging aspects of deploying not a another Web2 game where the project manager can probably work out the delivery date down to 24 hours. We're sort of dealing with like unexpected, unknown, new issues, new technical issues, and I think that treating the community as grown-ups and explaining, trying to be as open as possible about the how the sausage is actually made, so they have space in their hearts to be able to be a bit of flexible around dates. So that's the sort of managing timings has definitely been one of the more challenging aspects of building out a game on in a Web3 world.
Awesome.
So,
Well,
yeah.
nice. Well, Sebastian, Secretive, this has honestly been fantastic. I really want to thank both of you for sharing your perspectives on building a thriving Web3 gaming ecosystem, especially around some of your comments on stakeholder alignment and community building. So, again, thank you both for coming here and giving us these insights. Next week, we'll cover tokenomics and new models for gaming. If you're streaming, please make sure to register directly so that you can get a custom spot and ask questions over the Zoom. Again, you can only do so if you join our live Zoom call. And before hopping, I would also like to share to anyone listening that to also apply for our new program called Founders Basecamp. Last week, I went over Cairo Basecamp, but Founders Basecamp is our incubator style program to refine your startup idea, perfect your pitch, and get investor ready. It'll consist of 4 weeks of expert led sessions on market validation, go to market strategy, fundraising, and pitching. So make sure to check out the Starknet Foundation Twitter to apply, with the first session happening on April 1st. I'll see you all next week for tokenomics and